Hey everyone, hi out there. Welcome Salon Republic. We're going to get started shortly. We'll give everybody a chance to log on, get comfortable, and get ready. We have a great broadcast for you today. We're going to be presenting Razor 101. We also have the comments open, so if anybody has questions or comments, anything about the razor, anything about products, anything about technique, we'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So we're going to continue to let people jump on here and log on, and I'm going to continue with the slides and presentation and tell you what we're going to do today. All right, so we're going to talk about the anatomy of the razor. We'll talk about the terms for razor cutting. We'll see a long layers film. We'll talk about references and break down key elements of the technique of the razor. And then we'll bring on Nico, and he will be doing a live model, and we'll do a razor cut. And then we'll close. All right, so I know there's all levels of skill out there that some people only use scissors, some people use the razor for texturizing, some of you are well versed in the razor. One of the things that we think it's important to talk about is the anatomy of the razor. So all of the parts of the razor and how we use them. All right, so this is the razor that we prefer. When we talk about the tip, we're talking about the top to the middle or the front to the middle part of the blade and the edge. When we talk about the flat, we're talking about the center of the blade used flat against the head. And when we talk about the heel, we're talking about from the middle edge to the back of the blade. So we have the tip, heel, and the flat. Mostly when we talk about razor cutting, we're talking about using the edge. And when Nico comes on with the demo, we'll talk a little bit more about the edge. And it's really about finding the right angle of the blade so you get clean, crisp lines. All right, so I think it's also important that we talk about terms for razor cutting. So we just talked about the anatomy of the blade, the tip, heel, edge. So now let's talk about some terms for razor cutting. All right. All of these pictures and illustrations are great at showing, one, this is a great picture of the edge of the blade, so using the blade at a slight angle. And one term that we talk about when we talk about tension, we talk about tension, not only tension in the fingers, but we talk about the tension combed smooth from the scalp all the way through. And when you look at this image, what you can notice is the hair is pulled tight and taut, almost like a tightrope. Stroke. Another important key element of the razor is the stroke. So what's different from the scissor to the razor is how we manipulate our hand. So when we talk about stroke, we're talking about how much the hand is moving. So we generally refer to the stroke as a light, medium, or broad stroke. And so a light stroke leaves more weight through the perimeter. A medium stroke starts to release a little bit more weight, creating that softness and textured effect. And a broad stroke releases the most amount of weight through the line. Effects. So the great thing about the razor is you can create different textural effects with the blade. One, by adjusting your stroke. Two, by using the edge. Three, by using the flat. So basically, every time you turn your hand, the blade does something different. So we want to, the training in the eye is to know what your hand does and know what textural effect it creates as you're moving through the head shaft. All right. So I'm just going to pause here. I know it give you a lot of information. And again, letting everybody join on. I want to introduce myself. My name is Roy Romo. I am a Bumble Live educator. I'll let Nico introduce himself as he comes in. And just remind everybody out there, whether you joined from the beginning or just joining in now, we're covering all things Razor 101. Another important term for Razor 101 is weight removal. Again, this illustration shows you the technique of weight removal. One of the things that we strive for in razor cutting and Razor 101 is the touch. So when you're removing weight with the blade, depending on texture, condition of the hair, and your touch will all determine how the weight is removed and how much tension you need to bring all of that together. And just to direct your attention to the second slide, it's a little bit more of a close-up. You can see the tip of the blade going into the mid shaft of the hair. You can see that opening. You can see the gray background a little bit. You can see the opening and a clean, deliberate piece of weight being eliminated. All right, so we've talked about the anatomy, we've talked about some terms. Let's see these techniques in action. So we have a little film for you that I will narrate. All right, you can see our model here has probably like medium to fine hair, but a lot of it. You can see Christy has a bit of texture through her hair, a little bit of fuzz, right? So one of the key things we're always like, don't make more fuzz with the razor. So technique is key here and getting a great result. You can see Nico is talking through the consultation, looking at length, layers, right? So all the things that we do in a consultation. Gauging where that front layer is going to sit, what kind of angle he wants to get out of the razor, what kind of shape. All right, so Nico is going in with Hairdresser's Invisible Oil Primer. He's using to wet down and get right and prep his model, right? Keeping some moisture in the hair with this product and really distributing that product all the way through. Now going in with some straight blow dry for heat protection, for smoothness, and it's going to help calm down her texture a bit. All right, so we're going to begin in the back, right? Starting with our length, combing all of that product through, making sure that it's well distributed. There is our first section for our length. Nice clean sections. All the things that we talked about in the terms, combing, tension, stroke. You can kind of see that angle that he's going in on and is using the edge. He's also taking his time. I think the important thing with razor cutting is taking your time, seeing how much length you're cutting off and what, more importantly, what angle you're cutting off. We have some comments about weight removal. I'll speak to those in the next section when he starts taking those out. There's our finished length. Evaluating what is part of the front face framing, what is part of the bangs, looking to see head shape and where he is on the head shape, what wants to grow forward, we cut forward. So you can see Nico is sectioning out for the bangs. And making sure that section is nice and clean. So here he is taking his first section in that bang section, or first panel rather. Again, looking at the angle that he's cutting to. Here he goes with the subsection. Combing that straight out from the head using tension, over direction, using the edge of the blade with a very broad stroke. The broad stroke releases the most amount of weight through the line to keep that nice and soft. Here's the other side. There's the angle. There's the edge of the blade. Broad stroke. To keep that length and to keep those nice curtain bangs moving off to the side. All right, so now he's taking everything in front of the ear. You can see that's sectioned out right in front of the ear. Again, gauging that angle. That's a nice shot of the section. So he works from the bottom of that bang section with that over direction. And again, going in with a medium stroke and then transitioning into a broader stroke to not literally connect, but visually connect the bangs to the side. Here's a great visual of that connection. Nice. So our length is done, our bang section is done, our sides are done. So now we're going to move into the layering. The layering is a center section from the back of the bang. He's visually connecting where the side section and the layers are. There's that broad stroke. You can see the edge of the blade really working. Now on some textures that may have a little bit more density, this is also a time to take out weight. So some comments that we have in, or some questions that we have in the chat is, do you suggest cutting weight out first or cutting the line first? And how do you know where to start the weight removal? We do suggest going in with the tip of the blade and removing the weight first. This creates movement through the interior so that when you go to cut your line, you can adjust your stroke to the interior weight removal. And how do you know where to start your weight removal? A good rule of thumb where to start the weight removal is when you have the hair pulled out in tension, just to kind of bring your arm forward and to see where the tension breaks or where there's a little dip or a little valley. And that's a good place to start your weight removal. Here's our model with our finished look and our finished blowout. Pretty, soft, seamless, great curtain bangs, just a overall pretty long layer haircut. No weight lines, effortless, lived in, beautiful. All right, let's see what we have next. Are we bringing Nico in? Hey, Nico.
Hi, friend.
How's it going?
Going so good. Hi, everyone. Hello, Salon Republic. Welcome, welcome. I'm excited to be here. I'm actually all the way out in New York City at the house of Bumble, ready to do a haircut for you.
Who do you have with you? Who's your model?
Yes, of course. So this is the lovely Natalia. Say hello. Hello. Let me actually show you her length. I did go ahead and wet her hair down at the shampoo bowl already just to make it easier for me, but you can still get a good sense of what her existing length is. You know, she actually hasn't gotten a haircut since pandemic started, so it's been quite a while. And even so, she did mention though that she has this kind of cycle where she'll cut it and then grow it out and then cut it again and then grow it out. So it is kind of like a reoccurring cycle for her. So what I wanted to show you again is just how long it is currently and where we're going to take it to give you a visual is actually collarbone. So that's a lot of length that's going to come off. And I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited that she's open to it. The shortest she's ever gone is just to about off the shoulder bob, basically. And even though she's open to that today, if you were to look at her features and the length of her neck, her collarbone, she's very long through here. So I don't want to expose too much of that. I actually think it'd be nice to leave it here. And she actually prefers that this time around as well, but also for versatility so that she can actually still put it up if she wanted to, curl it if she wanted to, because of course that'll shrink a little bit. So she'll have a bit more options just with those extra 1.5 to 2 inches of length that we're actually going to leave for her today. As far as her bangs go, she has been trimming them herself, she mentioned, but I actually gave her props because I think they look good. You know,
yes, they do.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I do want to change though, obviously is the length. They're a little too long for her. It's just hugging the brows is where we want to go. And instead of it coming down, I actually do want to square this off. Because if you were to look at her, she's got such strong features and indentations through here that I actually want to show that off by actually exposing that corner and her cheekbones as well. So that's what's going to happen when we get to those bangs.
Yeah, and it's probably just the way the natural grow out of where her hairline drops, where they're just starting to angle down. And I agree with you, Nico. I think that, the video that we saw where the bangs were longer, those look good down. I think anything, corner of the eye always looks good, more square angled. That way you lift the face up.
Yeah, definitely. And just to explain to you her natural texture, when it air dries, it actually dries quite straight. You can kind of see that at the root because it's already drying. And part of that, I'm assuming, is because the length weighs it down. But she did say that once she cuts off some length, it's actually her wave is going to come alive. And you can already kind of see it now that it's been sitting here a little damp. You can see a little squiggle coming through there. So I'm excited to see, once we do cut off some of that length, to see what the texture ends up reading as. So that'll be kind of great to notice. And just to give you an idea, even though we're not going this short, something that's good to do anytime you're doing a bob or a graduated bob or anything in relation to neckline is just to see how their hairline sits. First of all, she has a really high hairline, which pretty much corresponds with, the length of her neck. And then she has a pretty neutral hairline as well, in the sense that all of these hairs grow pretty much straight down. There's a little bit of activity, but it's not even that visible. I'm assuming you can kind of see that through there. So just to get a sense of just to get a sense of density and texture and direction of growth, I wouldn't have any problem if I was going to be going any shorter than what we talked about, which is going to be around here in the back and then slightly longer to travel to reach her collarbone in the front. Do you have a specific part that you wear it to?
Usually just in the center.
Oh, great. All right. So, she doesn't really have a specific side part. She just said that she wears it in the center, which obviously gives me an easier approach because generally we cut everything. So that's basically.
All right, so it looks like Nico is moving on. He is priming the hair with prep. So just to bring some added moisture, starting to get some product through there, a lightweight product, doesn't build up, helps with the glide of razor, and keeps moisture, and it won't dry out like water will right away.
Yeah, you did catch what I mentioned a little earlier, which was that mid-shaft to ends are damp, but not the root, right?
Yeah.
Great. Just want to make sure. There was a little lag on my end, so I wasn't sure what was happening.
We got it. We can see everything. So as Nico is prepping and priming. Let's hear from you. How many out there use the razor? What are your favorite things to cut, whether it's bangs or texturizing? What do you like to use the razor for? Drop it in the comments. And Nico, how's her texture feeling? How's the condition of it? How would you describe her texture?
It's actually pretty smooth naturally and relatively glassy actually. So, which is why I chose prep. There's no need to give it any more moisture than it naturally has. And prep is going to just help dampen it for me without adding an excessive amount of moisture. So it's naturally glassy. So as I work here, I'm probably going to want to build texture into it. I even already have in my mind of using something along the surf family when we're done to help be able to give it that texture. With that said though, right now I do want to use something on the ends, mainly to help me as I'm cutting, both with the tool that I'm going to use, which is the razor of course, but also with the sections actually. So repair blow dry is great to seal the cuticle, give it the hair a further slip. And if you notice, I'm only going to apply it mid-shaft to ends, and a lot of this is going to be cut off anyway, so a lot of the product is going to disappear by the time that we're done. But this will also help to retain some moisture so that I don't have to re-wet it as much as I'm working.
Yeah, but even though it's going to be cut off, it's going to help you keep clean sections. It's going to keep your hair keep being as a detangler. I'm going to read through some of these comments. People are using the razor to pretty much cut all bangs, layers. I use the razor on almost every haircut. I love the softness. I also love to use it on to blend layers. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I was the same way in the beginning when I was learning the tool. I wasn't as confident using it to create a full haircut, and I would just use it either as we take you guys through these series of classes is to get you equally as confident in being able to use the razor for a full haircut. And that's always been our goal with most of the classes that we teach here out of BBU is understanding the parts of the tool, knowing how to use them to your benefit, and being confident enough that you can actually create a full haircut with it. So I'm going to start taking my first section down here just to show you, to me, this actually feels like a little too much hair in my fingers, especially for the first subsection. And it's a little too close to where she starts to round out quite aggressively. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of hair away. Oops, sorry.
So as Nico is sectioning out, what I'm loving is how clean the sections are. One of the things with the razor is really need to make sure that those sections are laser clean so that one, you can see where you are on the head shape, but two, just also to help you keep yourself organized and knowing where to use that razor.
So I'm just going to pump her up a little bit to bring her closer to eye level to me. And just to give you another quick reference for length, a really good way to do that is if I know this is going to hit her collarbone and I'm going to over direct it back here, this is actually where I want the target length to be. That way, as it wraps around, it gets a little longer towards the front. With that said, I'm even going to take it a slightly smidge shorter than that so that I can actually give myself space to drop each section longer than the previous. And we'll talk about that as I start to apply that idea or that technique.
So as Nico determines that length for the first section, you can see that he is going in with a medium to broad stroke just to start loosening up that line and create some texture. That line is looking beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Nice. I like where it already sits. I think that's a great start. And we'll continue to use that as our reference.
Now, Nico, I noticed you're in your second section with on some textures is a great place to start removing weight. Are you going to remove weight on this section or at all?
Not quite yet, and I'll show you why. The density of it is still quite translucent to me. Do you see how you can still see a lot of skin underneath?
Yes.
Even though the hair is wet and it will swell when it dries, I want to make sure that she has enough substance in her length line so that you can still see it. Plus, we're at a point on her head shape that if I were to overly take out weight, I'm going to actually collapse it too much and it'll turn too much into a potential bell shape. And some people actually do like that. But for me, I want to fill this in more for density and then maybe start taking out weight further up.
Great. Thanks for the explanation.
So definitely working from the center out. I first get rid of the stuff that I don't want to use on the right side. If by chance the width of this section is too much for you to hold in your fingers, you can actually split this in half. Sometimes that's nice to do just to give yourself a stopping point. I can see my guide underneath. And I start cutting once that guide falls out.
A key thing that we actually haven't mentioned yet, so Nico is using the heel of the blade, so the middle to the back of the blade on the left side, and on the right side he is using the tip, which is the front to the middle. What that allows for is it allows you to move the center weight around the body. Is Nico over-directing the length behind the shoulders? Are you over-directing slightly, Nico?
Yes.
So there's a little bit of over-direction just to keep that length. I would imagine it's so that as that length swings around the collarbone, it has a slight angle or will end up square, mostly so that it doesn't round up.
Yeah, exactly. Just to be clear with that is I'm pulling everything straight down into people like to pull this out here, and that to me is too much of a over direction outward, and that would round up my corner.
Yeah, and I mean, just watching your elevation and your over direction, it's almost even, you know, when I'm looking at your model's neckline, she's actually quite small through there. So you actually need a little bit of over direction so that it stays more square. If you follow the head shape, you do run that risk of rounding up or creating a hole over the shoulders, but you're looking perfect.
No holes over the shoulder.
Yeah.
Thank God. All right. Actually, I am going to start taking some weight out. This section already has a lot more density. You can see it because it's quite solid.
So Nico is using the tip of the blade. He's angling it slightly down so that he doesn't surface layer the top cuticle and coming down with a medium to broad stroke.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am isolating this section by removing all the stuff that I've already cut. You can actually see my previous section under there. And this allows me to just to make sure that I'm only working on the section that I just dropped out.
Right, you work so hard on establishing that great perimeter. You know, you don't want to cut into it. So you can already start to see the translucency through the line that he's about to cut. Here is the heel, here is the edge. Great stroke.
There's just a little bit right here that I missed, so I'm going to go back and get rid of that. You know, for most of us that are right-handed, and this would be a good conversation to have with you, Roy, since you are left-handed, though you cut with your right, don't you?
Yeah, I use a pen in my left hand, but I actually do cut with my right. What were you going to say just about switching the left to the right with the blade?
Yeah, more so about how naturally the the tip side should be a bit easier for us because of how open the positioning is in a sense, right? So this right side was the easiest for me when I first started cutting with the razor. It came naturally, let's say. The heel side, because we are asking for you to completely rotate it the other way, was a bit tricky, and I really had to work on it a lot, to the point where now I actually really like my heel side better than my tip side. You know, I focused on perfecting it, that I really end up liking the way that I control it more. Not to say that my tip side is weak, but originally when my heel side was weak, and now I feel like it's better than the tip side.
Well, you bring up a good point, especially on these bob lengths on the heel side. Again, depending on the weight and density, sometimes I need to break down or subsection. Now, I would say break down that left side, sometimes into 4 panels, just to make sure that that heel and the edge is not creating graduation through my line. So if I am still working on my skill level of how to hold the hair, how to hold the razor, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Just to your point of taking a little bit more time, focusing more on the edge, and more importantly, paying attention to the effects that you're putting into the hair. So if you're cutting and it's smooth and it looks like butter and you're loving the translucency, keep going. If you are cutting and it's hard to cut and you're not liking the result, if it's looking a little too frizzy or you've got a little bit too layered in your line, it's time to readjust and focus on that stroke. Here's some classic weight removal.
So I do want to talk about this in a little more detail, because you know I love explanations. And this question came up earlier. I heard someone ask is, how do you know how far up the strand to start? And when you release your tension, you can see the hair hugging the head shape here. We generally say, don't start above that bevel in order to give the hair a chance to hug the head shape. So here and below is a guideline as to where to start. But for her, even though it looks like I'm starting that high, I'm actually not. I'm just getting the razor in there, getting a little stroke in, and by the time I come in contact with hair, it's much lower than that. So really her weight removal lives somewhere within this range and not like as high as it may or may not look to you guys. So let me just do this section on this side. And they're very skinny panels. I mean, you can see what I took out here is very, very, very skinny strands of hair.
And I love what you just showed us, because you can see it's clean, it's deliberate, it's not all crazy and choppy. So remember, whatever you have in your hand is a mirror image of what you just cut into the hair. Nico, your stroke looks so effortless. I've known you spent many years perfecting the stroke, but do you have any tips on finding a consistent rhythm while cutting?
Finding a consistent rhythm while cutting. That's a good question. I mean, you know, you kind of gave it away in the statement, repetition for sure, just doing it over and over and over and over again. But for me, what it finally came down to, if you notice, I actually work with I consider relatively small sections in comparison to even you. I think you like taking big sections. Brittany takes the biggest sections, you know? So at the end of the day, you take whatever size section you're comfortable with and that feels good in your fingers. For me, smaller sections allow me to control the tool a lot easier and more consistently. So to your question, that's one of the things that really helped me and I stick to because I know that I like the results better. Not to say that I can't take big sections and still get a good result, I just feel more confident in the smaller sections. The other thing, and this is the thing that I always say in terms of the variables that you need to have addressed when razor cutting are the size of the section, the tension in your fingers, which you addressed, the dampness of the hair, even product in the hair, the angle of the tool, and the sharpness of the blade as well. I actually don't remember when I last used this to cut, but if you notice when I first took weight out, I actually was a little too heavy-handed and it felt a bit aggressive. So I had to be a bit lighter with my touch because this is quite sharp at the moment, which is a good thing. So I needed to make sure that I eased up on how much pressure I put on it. So sometimes I put more pressure because it's dull or less pressure because it's sharp. But making sure that all of those variables that I just stated are there is going to ensure a much smoother and fluid outcome.
I love it. All those things definitely make a lot of sense and clarity. And I think to summarize everything that you just said is in order to get a consistent stroke while cutting is cut for comfort.
Yeah.
Feel it out, see what feels good to you, whether larger sections or smaller sections, and control your hands. Just because it's a razor doesn't mean that it has to be cut very quickly. Everyone's at their own pace. What are you looking for?
I just wanted to show you what I have so far because I'm really happy with, you see how soft the line looks down there? The wave removal is allowing for her natural wave to come through, but at the same time, it hasn't collapsed this to the point where it's indented. Left two sections alone and then started above that. From here, I just want to show you that my last section basically reaches the height of the hairline right over the ear. So because this section transitions all the way into the sides, I'm actually going to go from the low crown all the way to the low recession with my next subsection.
Looking great. Loving that shape.
Thank you, thank you. And then just because her hair's so long and I don't want to fight with it, I am actually going to clip this out of the way just to keep it contained.
So if you notice, Nico's section is at the crest of the occipital, just to the low recession.
So something that we do here that I found really, really, really helpful when I first started cutting with the razor is I need to put tension in my fingers. Actually, I take that back. I'll explain it to you, but then I'll explain to you why it's not going to necessarily be the case so much here. Anything that is disrupted by the ear, we're going to hold on to and just call this our transition point. Actually, oddly enough, her ear is already kind of giving me the subsection. Do you see how it splits right here? All of this is in front of the ear, this is over the ear, and this is behind the ear.
Yeah, cut where it lives. If it grows in front, cut it in front. And so through the back, Nico has his line established. And the reason to go to the low recession for the first section in the side is we're establishing our length through the side. So those same exact small section that Nico takes, he is cutting for comfort and allowing himself to make that connection through the angle or the length through the front. So he's transitioning from the back to the front. Easy, right?
Easy peasy.
Again, taking into consideration all of the angles and elevation that he has previously been taking. So nothing's changing, right? Still staying on path.
Sorry. Gotta get used to these masks. So now everything that does sit over the ear, I'm gonna go ahead and direct it back. And remember, I do want to build up a little bit of length with her, so this over direction is going to start that. And everything that sits in front of the ear, which is a baby section right now, is also going to get over directed back and then match to that previous guide. Perfect. So there's my outline coming from back to the front, and now I'm going to finish this whole right side since I already have a reference for length there. So, one of the things that I have noticed over time is, razor cutting can be very methodical and you can treat it as such. But at the same time, it can also be very organic once you start to, look beyond the variables and pay attention to the individual as a whole. But I generally always take out weight first. That allows me to really see the texture and define or determine my stroke. You can tell that her hair transitions the density from the back to the front right around here, because look, all of this is quite translucent, and this still has a tiny bit of weight to it because I can see the darkness in it. So I just took a little baby bit of weight out of that subsection.
That was a great visual. What brings us to our next question is, do you always start weight removal in the same spot? So that generally a general broad answer would be no, because as the head shape changes, the density changes. So a great example is, Nico started that weight removal in a different spot over the ear, mostly because she's finer. And it doesn't mean that you don't want to take any weight out. You still want to carry the same weight distribution from the back to the front. So depending on where you are in the head shape, what the density is calling for, you'll adjust where you take out weight. The easiest way to assess where to take the weight out is if you keep clean sections and work in panels, you can evaluate the panel in your hand and see where the lightness and where the darkness is. The darkness is where you want to start to loosen it up a little bit. And how much you loosen up depends on your touch, your pressure, and your stroke.
So yeah, I do want to elaborate on that, friend. Sometimes it looks like I'm always entering at the same spot. But remember what I said earlier is that sometimes I place it in, I get my little momentum going, not until I put pressure on it, that's when it's going to cut. So sometimes I cut lower, sometimes I cut higher, sometimes I cut lower. So, that's a good point in terms of what you said is the density determines where you take out the weight. But with that said, because I think what they're asking is, if I were to take out the weight at the same spot through the whole head or the whole section, then I'll have a potential indentation of weight because I entered at the exact same place. So you do want to be a bit random about it so that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think and another way to break down random is maybe just stagger your weight removal.
It's actually a nice little visual of the line in my corner coming
Great.
front. And then this is my last section to reach center top. So something that I did a moment ago, which didn't really give you guys a chance to see or talk about. Let me just see if it'll happen in this subsection. At this point, I already have enough strength in my outline, right? You can obviously see that. that in a way, it doesn't really matter what I do to this section. I mean, it does matter in the sense that I don't want to cut it here because then it'll be completely disconnected and she'll probably hate me, right? But one of the things I like to do as I work my way up is here's the existing length. So my fingers are pretty close to that. Here's my weight, and then I exit right at my length. So I'm creating these really long tapered lines. So some of it might reach the actual length, some of it might not, but that starts to give me a bit of variation down here so that it's not this one solid outline. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect sense.
And if by chance I miss my mark, just to show you, which I barely did, let's just pretend that maybe it looked like this, where I left one too long. I could always go back in and pinch it and get rid of stuff that I might have left longer than the actual outline.
Yeah, I think it's important to, what you just described, if there's anything a little off, that you still cut it at the same angle, meaning using the edge, pinching it for tension, just that those, one of the things that the razor does is create softness, but you don't want to create so much softness that your line is too weak. So any adjustments that need to be made, still cut them in the same regard as if you were cutting them in fluid in your line. So tension, edge, stroke. All right, second side.
Yep, so that side is done. Oh, look, that kind of looks like it's part of it, but you can see that side's done. Again, from the low crown into the low recession will be my first subsection. Because she's been sitting here, this feels a little bit too dry, so I'm just going to dampen some of that before I get going. And this is honestly the beauty of prep. Like, I can actually keep using it and it's not going to build up. Eventually it can and it will, depending on the person's porosity and density, but she's got good enough porosity and density that it's absorbing right in.
Yeah.
Out on this side where I'm at on the opposite side, just to give myself a reference of like where that hair lives. I'm going to isolate this section first and then take out weight. You can see this section is quite solid, meaning there's a lot of density here. So I can take out a good amount of hair. As I'm reaching right behind her ear, I do have to be careful. I started lower there, and I'm getting higher and heavier as I get back into the interior. Because there's less hair here, I want to make sure that I leave all the density where it doesn't exist, basically. So we'll just section this off. Am I good?
Yes.
Great.
Keep going.
Oh my God.
There was a little lag, but you're back.
Still not used to these masks. Okay, so over direct everything that sits on top of the ear, behind it, and that little bit of over direction is what's going to give me my shorter to longer. The other thing that happens here, if you notice, I even ease up on my stroke because there's less hair and because I want to make sure that I nail this, this guideline. So I just like taking this section from the front. It's just easier for me to actually see. And it's a quick little swipe of the comb. Lost my little clippy. And again, the methodical part to me is take out weight, remove the length. But the variables are my tension, my elevation, the amount of weight that I take out, how high I start or how low I start. So I have this section, it's isolated from the previous. And everything in front of the ear, actually there's equally as minimal hair here, but remember I took a tiny slither behind the ear on that side. This side doesn't allow for it. There's not enough hair there to take any weight out. So something else that I really want to be cautious of and pay attention to is her head positioning. I've had it down majority of the time I was working in the back, but now that I'm traveling around the shoulder and in front of the ear, I make sure that she's more neutral.
Checking your line, checking for any excess.
Yeah, you know what's happening here, just to give you an understanding, is she's getting a lot wavier and curlier behind her ear. So this is shrinking a little bit, and this is staying really straight. And she actually mentioned that, I kind of forgot. She mentioned that to me in her consultation, is that this hair tends to stay straighter and flaps in a sense. So it was a little too long down there. I still wanted to make sure it felt like it flowed. One of the things I will probably have to do in the end is go back in here and either layer this corner off, so that way it's not as long or as straight, or maybe layer the top. And I have spoken to her about possibly layering the top, so she's kind of anticipating it. And we'll see. I got to see how the hair is looking before I make that decision. So here's that section where on the other side I said, it kind of doesn't matter so much now what I do to it, that I can actually taper these bits of length right into a nice little fine point. This one I have to be a bit careful with. There's my length. And then some of this got out of my hand, so I'll just go back in and trim it. And then here's my last section. How are you feeling?
Excellent.
Wow, look at you.
It feels so good.
That's a nice length.
That length is really flattering, really great on the neckline.
Yeah, I like it. It looks good on here. You can see that this little corner is a pinch too long, opposite to the other side, and that's easy to adjust. I'm not even going to worry about it just yet. I'll take care of that as it dries And as I do the fringe, and remember, I might layer the top or those corners, so I'm not going to kill myself just yet over it.
Yeah, also, yeah, see how those dry on its own, like that, like you said, and like she said, that's the side, she has a little bit more texture through there. So maybe let that dry on its own to see, you can better evaluate how much it's going to shrink up or how much length is still there. Are we moving on to the bangs?
Yep.
Nice.
So let me first just find the section and then I will break down, oh my God, the explanation, Jesus. It's not like it's my first time cutting someone with a mass.
Even that hair combed away from her face is so nice.
So I'm just going to get some prep on these very edges since I'm about to cut these. If you notice, I'm not even applying it at the root. I'm just getting those very, very, very ends to absorb it pretty well. Okay, so let me just explain it really quickly and then I'm just going to go right in and cut. I'm actually going to work my way from the outside in and it's going to just barely hug her brow. So it's going to go this way, but I'm going to take subsections working in an X towards center or diagonal and then sections working in a diagonal towards center the opposite way. So I'm going to push that out of the way and just start with a little fine section that is pretty much just her hairline. And since her hairline does curve here, my section is slightly diagonal.
So it looks like Nico is going in on that section where he noticed in the consultation where there's a little bit of a drop. So going in at that angle from the eyebrow or side of the eye to the nose. And that's a great way to balance out and adjust that angle.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the length in the center, I'm really only trimming. It's these corners that are losing a lot more length and are getting squared off. And as I work my way up, there's just a natural elevation right off the round of the head. And the hardest part about this, because she's been trimming her bangs, is that I don't have that much length to hold on to. So I'm doing my best to really keep that hair in my fingers. Okay, so now we'll go the opposite way. Oh, and this is nice. I already have a reference for length from the opposite side. That just fell right out. So I have an idea as to where I'm traveling to. If by chance that wasn't the case, then I'm using her features and her brows as a point of reference. Anything that I need to know, please. And this is the same technique that we used in the length line, which was tip to the right, heel to the left, applies here. So because my section, when I cut, is traveling from the right side to the left, I'm using the heel. And to kind of correspond to your question earlier, is a really great way to get easier control of the heel is through elevation. Because look, there's nothing in the way. I can literally work my razor right through the section. Whereas when there's low elevation, you're having to fight with either the back or the shoulder. It's not as easy to get the razor in there. So that's actually one of the ways that I started to really strengthen my heel side, was once I started to use it in elevation, I started to understand the positioning of the heel a lot better. Does that make sense, friend?
Yeah.
Here's your new little friend.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Looking good.
Oh, it's so cute. There might be like one or two bits right here that feel a little too long, but you know what I'm gonna do? Because this side already dried a lot more, is I'm gonna let the whole thing dry and then just use my scissors to make any changes if I need to. But it looks even good, just kind of swept over to the side like that. What's nice is that even though she lost the length in her corners, it's not like she has to wear it one way, which is straight on. She can actually still sweep it over and it's gonna look just as good, which is really nice.
So what are you thinking for the style?
Well, I definitely want to show off her natural texture, and I want to use Surf Leave-In Styler. I think she'll be perfect for it. But I just have to see. Oh, you look so good. Look at that. So, yeah, I don't. The weight removal that we did is allowing for it to come alive so good and so well that I don't think it needs any surface layering after all. All of that internal layering. What's that?
Agreed.
Yeah, all of that weight removal, we're actually going to consider it internal layering, which it is. That's actually coming through to the surface, since I did take some weight out of the surface as well. So in this case, I'll just use that, all of the work that I did there, as a form of layering. So let me show you guys how to apply this guy. I'll start back here. I'm just letting it kind of catch off my hands and fingers, which are almost acting as little claws. And I have a good amount of it. Sorry, I didn't show you how much I was applying there or what I was applying, but I'm going to do more. So I'm just going to give you a chance to see it. So Surf Styling Leave-In, this is a great hybrid of both a gel and a cream that's going to give her texture without the sodium, actually. So this particular product does not have any sodium in it the way the rest of the Surf line does. And that's partly why I chose it for her, so that it still gives us the texture but doesn't feel like it's drying it out, potentially, allegedly.
What I do love about that product is because it comes out like a gel but performs like a cream, that product gives a lot of coverage to the hair without overwhelming the hair. And I love the texture that dries in that product naturally. So a little bit of a matte texture. It will also help show off what the razor did.
Yes, if you notice, it immediately started to clump up the ends, and it does allow me to see all of those little bits that the razor created, which is a lot of, short, long, and tapered edges, which is really nice. So yeah, that's it, actually. I think it's going to dry perfectly for her. What I do want to do is I'm going to allow for it to air dry, and then we'll take some after photos and hopefully send them to you guys or post them. But I don't want to diffuse it because I don't want it to start to expand on me. And again, she has such great texture that I'm going to leave it alone for a little while. Sound good?
Sounds good. Can't wait to see the finished result. I want to say thank you for this great demo. Thank you for Salon Republic for watching on the live or whether you're watching it later. We appreciate you and glad you joined us.
Yeah, so happy to be here. Till next time, you guys. Hopefully, we'll continue working and showing you some more demonstrations. And maybe we'll get to see Natalia again someday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.